We're going to break down the anatomy of what is basically a massive digital heist in the making. It's called the WP2 shell vulnerability. And listen, if you manage, own, or even just occasionally tweak a WordPress website, you really need to pay attention right now. We're going to unpack exactly what this threat is, how the bad guys are actually getting in, what you stand to lose, and most importantly, how you can lock your digital doors today.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for the breakdown. First, we'll look at the WP2 shell security threat itself. Then we'll see exactly how the exploit works under the hood. Third, we'll go over the potential losses. And finally, we'll cover exactly how to protect your site.
To really wrap our heads around the gravity of this situation, we have to start with this absolutely massive number, 500 million. That's the estimated total install base of WordPress websites across the entire globe right now. I mean, when a vulnerability strikes at the actual core of WordPress, the attack surface isn't just large, right? It is quite literally the foundation of the modern internet.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for today's explainer. Is your site exposed to WP2 shell? I really want you to think about that, because the stakes here are incredibly high. This isn't some obscure bug hidden deep inside a weird plugin that you might have installed years ago. No, this is a critical flaw baked right into the core of the WordPress platform itself.
So let's jump right into Section 1, the WP2 shell security threat. You know, a lot of site owners just kind of assume that if they run a clean, bare installation with absolutely zero third-party plugins, they're perfectly safe. Well, WP2 shell completely shatters that assumption. A pristine, right-out-of-the-box WordPress installation is actually the primary target here. It's technically not just one bug, it's a chained exploit. It links together two separate vulnerabilities found directly in the WordPress core. By chaining these flaws together, an attacker can take a totally anonymous web request, meaning they literally don't even need a username or a password, and escalate it all the way to unauthenticated remote code execution. They can just run arbitrary commands right on your server.
All right, Section 2, how the exploit works. And this brilliantly illustrates how attackers actually get past the lobby and into the vault. It takes two halves to make this work. On one side, we have CVE 2026-6137. This is a SQL injection vulnerability found in WordPress version 6.8 and up. Now, by itself, it allows some crafted input to mess with a database query. But on the other side, we have CVE 2026-63030. This is the big one, the unauthenticated remote code execution vulnerability, and that's present in version 6.9 and up. Think of the SQL injection as the wedge in the door, but that second bug, that's what blows the hinges completely off, upgrading the whole thing to a critical code execution threat. Let's walk through exactly how this plays out step by step. Imagine the WordPress REST API batch endpoint is a frantic hotel receptionist trying to check in a dozen guests all at once. In step 1, the attacker sends an anonymous request to this endpoint. Then, in step 2, they intentionally trigger an error in just one of the subrequests. This knocks the system's tracking arrays completely out of step. It's exactly like that flustered receptionist accidentally handing the wrong room key to the next person in line. Because of that confusion, in step 3, the attacker's malicious input slips right past the security checks and lands squarely inside a vulnerable SQL query. Finally, in step 4, this bounded database injection is escalated into full, unauthenticated remote code execution. Boom. The attacker now holds the master keys to the building. Now, there is one absolutely crucial detail here we pulled from the source material. This full code execution path we just walked through, it only works when the WordPress site lacks a persistent object cache. So, you might be sitting there thinking, oh, great, I'll just rely on my cache. But here is the kicker. Having no persistent object cache is the standard default setup for the vast majority of WordPress sites out there. So, yeah, that default install exposure firmly stands. Moving on to Section 3, understanding the potential losses. If an attacker actually pulls off this chain on your site, what exactly are the catastrophic consequences? Like, what do you really stand to lose here? Well, the damages are immediate, and they are severe. First up, complete database alteration. Thanks to that SQL injection, an attacker can read, modify, or just straight up delete any data you hold. Second, unauthenticated remote code execution. They can run malicious scripts, install hidden backdoors, or even use your server as a staging ground to attack other people. And all of that basically culminates in the final point, full site takeover risk. They completely own your digital real estate, and they didn't even need to steal a single password to do it. Now, what's really interesting about this quote from the Hacker News is how blunt it is.
Mass exploitation of WordPress is an industry now. We aren't talking about some lone hacker sitting in a dark basement manually typing out SQL commands. No way. We're talking about highly organized, highly automated criminal enterprises. They literally scan the entire internet for vulnerabilities, exactly like WP2 Shell, and they exploit them automatically at a massive scale. To really ground that reality, just look at this number from a past incident reported by our source: 17,000. In a previous mass exploitation campaign, one that involved a flaw in a single caching plugin, threat actors successfully compromised over 17,000 sites. And remember, that previous bug only worked on non-default settings. WP2 Shell works on the default setting, so the potential for mass compromise here is just staggering.
Okay, let's pivot to Section 4, How to Protect Your Site.
So the crucial point is knowing exactly which version you're currently running and exactly what patch you need to apply right now. If you're on the 6.8 branch, you're only vulnerable to the SQL injection part, and you need to update to version 6.8.6 immediately. However, if you are running version 6.9 or 7.0, you're fully exposed to the critical remote code execution chain. You absolutely must patch to version 6.9.5 or 7.0.2 respectively. Now, because this is being treated as an absolute highest priority issue, WordPress is actually forcing automatic updates to affected sites right through their auto-update system. But please hear me clearly on this. Do not blindly trust that the update landed successfully. You have to manually log into your dashboard and actually verify your patch level yourself. If you happen to have auto-updates disabled, your site is 100% exposed until you go in and take action. Now, if for some reason you literally cannot update right this second, there are a few stopgap mitigations you can deploy. First, if you use Cloudflare, make sure your web application firewall managed rules are enabled. They actually deployed protections for this before it even went public, which is awesome. Alternatively, you can block anonymous access to the specific batch endpoints, or just disable the WP REST API entirely. But a quick warning, these are temporary fixes, right? Doing this might actually break legitimate plugin integrations on your site. Actually patching and updating is the only true fix here. So, we're going to wrap up today's explainer with this thought. A working proof of concept for this exploit is already public. The treasure map is officially out there. It is now a relentless, high-stakes foot race between you applying the patch and threat actors constantly scanning the web to find you. Are you patching faster than attackers can scan? Don't wait around to find out. Go check your systems immediately. Thanks so much for joining me for this.